My name is Renee Salas, and I'm the senior author of the 2022 Lancet Countdown US Brief, having been the lead author for the past 4 years and a global author.
And I'm Gina McCarthy. I am the former National Climate Advisor for the Biden administration, and I'm the former EPA administrator under the Obama administration. And I am a big fangirl of Renee Salas, so that's who we are.
Well, thank you. It's such an honor and privilege to have you here, especially in the middle of you getting some much deserved rest. So your leadership as the National Climate Advisor led to the most aggressive action on climate change in US history, creating new jobs and unprecedented clean energy innovation and investments. What are you most proud of during your time in the Biden administration?
Oh, Lord, that's a really good question. I'm proud of the fact that I joined it. And I'm proud of the fact that we had a really terrific climate policy office that was working across the administration, because it really changed the flavor of the discussion of climate tremendously. It was no longer just an isolated issue, but it was understood as something that needed to underpin and be considered in every decision across the administration, not just as its own little island. And so for me, creating a policy office within the White House with that broad reach was enormously important, because it made people understand that climate change is not just real, but it impacts everything we do. And therefore, we need to consider it in every single decision that we made. So that was really, for me, one of the big changes that I most enjoyed. But Renee, if I can just go on a little bit more, it also, because this is something that you and I have talked about now, I guess, for years, is that it allowed us a lot more latitude during the Biden administration with the framing that President Biden had on climate that he articulated even during his campaign, was that climate change doesn't have to create responses that require sacrifice for us to resolve. And in fact, climate change was the most challenging problem that the world faced, that we're creating basically instability and security challenges and economic devastation and impacts on the most vulnerable communities. And instead, we could actually look at a very positive response and opportunity-driven way of addressing climate that would engage people, that wouldn't ask them to sacrifice, but would give them benefits. And you and I for years have been talking about the fact that health is a driver for people that matter. So it's the economy, it's keeping people safe, it's allowing them to understand that climate change can benefit them as human beings in their condition, and that health is a significant reason why climate needs to be addressed and can be addressed in ways that people will engage in instead of run away from. So for me, that whole framing was why I went to the Biden administration, and I'm no longer there, but that drive for continued change and that drive to make sure that health is part of the equation continues to be, part of my life, and will be for as long as I have it.
Well, that is great news to all of us that you will continue to stay engaged, because we definitely need you, and we have been inspired by everything that you've done. So thank you for your service. And your words from years ago continue to resonate. This isn't about polar bears and icebergs. It's about our health, our children. So the 2022 US Brief really tries to hopefully further encapsulate that. And I think also to harness the unique opportunity that we have right now, because with the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the CHIPS Act, the federal government is doing a lot on climate change, but we can't have it be a great we're done, because we know that there's still so much left to do. So what else should the federal government be doing, and how can we keep momentum up for climate action?
Well, Renee, I hope that you and all the authors of at least the U.S. Lancet report take a little credit for the way it's been maturing. You know, I did read the material that you sent to me. I very much appreciated it. And it has very crisp sort of ways of outlining what we can do, but also how we can do that in a way that maximizes health benefits, particularly for, you know, the communities that are most impacted and have been for a long time by these environmental challenges that we're facing. And so I think the thing that I liked the best was I think you took more leaps forward. I think it's very clear about the 5 priorities that you're looking at, the sectors that where the opportunities arise and where the benefits will be significant for families and for communities. But it also challenged, you know, it issued policy, you know, recommendations that are both, I think, some of which we were able to embrace and some of which still hang out there that we need to think about in terms of how you make a transition from fossil fuel-based economy to a clean energy economy. And so for me, we looked at the sectors in the US when I was in the administration, and I'm sure they continue to do that now because there's much more work that obviously that needs to be done. And we look for ways that we could spark that transition in sectors like transportation, in sectors like the energy sector, even in sectors like agriculture and others, where we know climate impacts everything. The idea was, how do we start making investments in those sectors that actually generate momentum that people can see and feel and taste in their own lives, where we put people back to work, we pay good salaries for those people, where we start manufacturing in the US again, because we lost that decades ago in the Midwest and it's never recovered, where we can work with agriculture and farmers to start doing better at how they produce food for us that's not just healthy, but that is healthy for our climate quest as well, because it's all of this is essential. And so I really appreciate the way it's framed, because I think it allows people to embrace the challenges in each of these sectors. Plus, it's underpinned with an understanding, as we all in this business know, that we're just getting started. You know, we are going to be able to achieve, between the the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, some major benefits, I think, in movement forward. We know that between those two, we've got covered our ability to get, you know, half of our greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 2030. But as you indicated, the challenge is global. How do you translate this kind of thing to the work that's going to be undertaken soon with the Conference of the Parties in Egypt, where I will thankfully be, which is great. I have opportunities to go. How do you translate this? How do you make this a really well thought out strategy that can produce the kind of greenhouse gas reductions worldwide and get people on a better course in all countries, not just in the US? And so I think it's very challenging. I think you nailed it in terms of some of the major sectors where we've improved, but you've also nailed it by saying, hey, it ain't enough. we have to keep pushing. But I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the environmental justice initiative as part of this, the recognition that you have to invest in the communities that have been left behind. It's not just an equity and fairness issue, but it's a smart way to invest money so that you building from the bottom up, lifting people out of poverty, regrowing the middle class again. That's the biggest excitement for me, because I've always been in the lower to middle. And I expect that that's where I will always be. And you have to recognize that all of us who have the privilege of being in the middle class now have to raise, you know, raise our hands in reaching out to the communities that we know have been systemically disinvested in. And we know that part of that is just inherent discrimination in our culture today that we need to fight. So I think a lot of the work that we need to do is not just continuing the federal battle of how we, integrate climate into all our considerations and do more and more and more, and how we start weaning off our reliance on fossil fuels in a more aggressive way than what's been done before. But it's also about, making sure that we work at the state and community level, because there will be investments opportunities at those levels. And I know there are many states that have done great things to move forward with a variety of programs to address climate. But frankly, that seems to me to be a big missing piece, because there are parts of the climate challenge that just can't be resolved at the federal level. I'm talking about how you get homes and buildings now upgraded. Yes, we can invest in heat pumps and solar, but there needs to be new building standards. There needs to be different transportation choices that usually are the purview of the states to decide. And that's where we have to continue to keep pushing, because these will be big investments. But if they are not invested properly, if they are not invested with clear insight and opportunities for communities to define their own future, especially environmental justice communities, then we'll simply have missed the biggest opportunity of our lifetime, and frankly, our children's lifetime.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. And I think that one of the things that we have talked a lot about during the creation of the 2022 US brief is how can we make sure that these investments at the federal, state, and local level not only prioritize the health and equity benefits, but make sure that they're maximized. So what can health professionals do to help make sure that happens, that the sickest are treated first, just like I do in the emergency department?
Yeah, it's we're talking about triaging at the federal level. Hey, I think it's challenging, but the rules of the road matter. When you have this kind of resource, you can't just put it out there and say, we'd really like it to go to environmental justice communities. You actually have to build that in to how dollars go. And so that is being built in the bipartisan infrastructure law in a very clear and decisive way, because under the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's where huge investments in environmental justice from an infrastructure basis are being identified for water and wastewater facilities, for how we start rethinking transportation choices. All of these things between those two bills, the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law, are actually being built into the requirements for how you get money and how you track it. So it's not just, the bill says we ought to do this. It's being defined. And there's been significant pushback on some of that, because the administration has been doing that to make sure that workers get their fair share, and that union work is rewarded, and that products that are produced in the United States or America get benefited in how investments are aligned. And so it has to be in here, Renee. It can't just be, I hope it happens this way. So it needs to be tracked. Requirements are there. There is $60 billion in environmental justice investments in the infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Act alone. And the bipartisan infrastructure law has a similar amount. This is the biggest investment in environmental justice that any bill or any administration has ever made. We cannot blow it. And the second way in which we can do it is not just to build in the requirements and to track them, but the communities have to be involved in their own destiny. And right now it's very challenging, and it has been forever, for environmental justice communities to have the expertise they need to compete for funds. So there is requirements in the infrastructure law and in the IRA that requires that environmental justice communities get their fair share. But it also goes so far as to create specific block grants, which communities can access. It is going to require training in environmental justice communities, so they can have the support they need to actually participate in this process. And it requires that they define their own destiny. We are not, I have to make sure that everybody here knows I'm no longer with the administration, nor am I lobbying them. So when I say we, I have to remember to say me. You know, this administration and me understand that environmental justice is the key issue that's going to allow people in the United States to understand that these congressional actions were designed to make sure that we show people what a climate constrained world means to them and how they can benefit directly in their own communities. So there is no sort of stone left unturned that would allow states or other local communities to actually kick the environmental justice communities to the side or make sure that they up them so that they're the first in line for these funds. It is directed, it is going to be impactful. And I think the main things that you and I and everyone else can do is to support communities. Yes, they're going to get some resources to understand how they can engage and to build their capacity. But honestly, all of us should be working with communities that have been left behind to ensure that our expertise is incorporated into their thinking as much as they want it to. Not as much as we do, but we should be providing with the services that they believe they need in order to succeed. And so that's the challenge that I think is most difficult. But the administration, I know, has a tracking system, because the requirement was that 40% of these resources go to environmental justice communities. And if we can join environmental justice communities in tracking that and supporting them, I think they have a fair shot, not just achieving that 40%, but going beyond. Because you and I know that's where the inequities lie. That's where the health challenges are most severe. And that's where these investment dollars can go the furthest, right? For every buck we spend there, we're going to get so much more than if we spend it in other communities that are already at a higher level in terms of their health viability, in terms of the way in which they look at themselves and compete. So we just have to do work. We have to be there for them to the extent that they want us. But we also have to recognize that all these decisions have to be made by the environmental justice communities themselves, so they can start being empowered to define their own destiny.
Yet again, amazingly well said. I think one other thing you had mentioned is we are interconnected into the global landscape. And it's wonderful to hear that you will be at COP27. I'll be there as well. And I know that there are hopefully even more health professionals from around the world that are going to advocate for their patients and for their communities, because we know it's making our job harder and threatening the very mission where we went into a health-related profession at the beginning. And so what can health professionals do to make sure that we can get what's needed at COP27 done?
Well, I think it's exciting that you're going to be there. And I know every year it seems to be that more folks go. And I think continuing to make very clear and do some of the work that you did in Lancet on the analysis around this, make clear what countries are being left behind. You know, try to clarify. I mean, you gave a great direction to the US, but, you know, the direction to the US also needs to be that we need to be partners with the rest of the world. It needs to acknowledge the benefits that we have received that other countries have yet to even dream about. So while I am so proud of the work that has been done on the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, I mean, there's a lot of investment that's been made in the US. But I co-chair track 2 discussion with some really great people between the US and India. And I've just restarted that, and I did my first meeting virtually last week. And a track 2 is nonprofits. It's not government officials. Many are ex-government officials like myself, but you know, I tried to make it clear that we can be so proud of the resources that we are now dedicating to climate in the US. But frankly, if we can't go to other countries with the same level of commitment to those countries most in need, then we have missed the boat entirely. So the US has yet to invest the kind of resources that it really has to invest in order to be the partner we want to be globally. And we have to think creatively about how to translate these kinds of opportunities to other countries in ways that they will be participating in, helping to define, and in ways that we can all agree get us on a global path to net zero by 2050. And we're nowhere near our commitment level at all. And I know that Secretary Kerry and others continue to push, but frankly, it needs to be all of us. And the healthcare industry and sector have always been, healthcare professionals are some of the most trusted advisors, not just for people, but for governments. When we recognize the science, when we can identify the impacts to communities in ways that every family will understand, and also recognize the benefits from investments or other strategies, then I think your voice can make a big difference in the negotiations and the discussions. So don't be quiet, elevate your voices. Be as challenging as you are in this Lancet with what the US has done and not done, and focus on making sure that all of those tenets that you're bringing to the US and that the US has brought to the table for our domestic work get reflected in the way in which we treat the countries that no longer have the capacity to rebuild without investments from the developing world, the developed world. You know, we've found it enormously challenging for people to understand that these types of international investments are not just about, you know, securing a climate future we can all be proud of. They're about, what do we do with current instability? What do we do to now allow economies to stabilize again and move forward? After 2 years of a pandemic, we are not in a situation that can be dismissed in terms of the instability in our own countries, the instability in our own democracy, the instability in democracies across the world. Don't think that climate is just about the planet or even just about health. It is about the future for our democracies. It's about securing our future for our children. And that is going to be, I think, a central tenet of, and needs to be for all of us as we go to the COP. This is no longer just a climate discussion. It's an economic security discussion. It's an economic stability discussion. It is a way in which we need to make our world stable again in every country. And that means big responsibilities from the developed world, who is already strained in terms of its own economic infrastructure, and needs to look beyond that to see the strategies that need to be developed internationally to make the world a more stable place again.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and highlighting how this U.S. brief is meant to be a living document and a tool that we, again, hope everyone can take and go out and advocate within your spheres, whether that's nationally or globally. And we can and we will achieve this, but only by working together. So thank you for your inspirational leadership, and onward together.
Thanks. Thanks, Renee. And thanks everybody for pulling together such a terrific report.